Hey everyone, welcome to episode 58 of PixlFeed Radio. And I'm here with my friend Steven Colby. Steven, how you doing today?
Oh, great. Good morning. How are you?
It's morning to you. It's pretty much afternoon here because you are in the middle of everything, man. Palo Alto, California. You just told me before we even started recording that you live right between Apple and Google. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's about a 15-minute bike ride to either one of them.
That's amazing. That's so cool.
Google's a little bit downhill, so it's faster.
Do you ever sneak in there and just get the free food? I totally
No, but I've been there. I've done stuff and visited and gotten the free food. Back in like '99, I told my wife that she should go to work for them because they were having free food, and that was a year or so after they started. She said, "Nah, stick with IBM."
Oh man. Well, it's like I told my dad back then to buy some stock on Google and Yahoo and then Amazon. And of course he didn't listen. And now he regrets not listening to me. Yeah. But what do I know? I was just 13 at the time, 12 at the time, So I don't blame him. But for those of you that don't know Steven here, he's actually a partner at Ramon Law, which is I guess now it's kind of a virtual firm, but you're still in Silicon Valley, and you specialize in startups and patent law, which a lot of people are always kind of confused about. So I really wanted to talk to you about that. But before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? I mean, did you always knew that you want to be an attorney, or were you one of those like at one point it's like I got to figure out what I want to do with my life?
No. Let me see. I was a scientist. Okay, you got to have the Einstein.
You do. You have the Einstein look going on.
You got to have it up there.
Doc Brown.
I went for Halloween. I went as Einstein, and so
that's awesome.
I was a scientist, and I was the CTO of a company for most of the '90s. Getting products out the door, hitting the trade show floors. That was kind of my bread and butter. I really loved it. I like to travel. It was a lot of fun. I like to sell things. That's really
right.
Good activity. And I was an inventor too. I had a bunch of patents. And so in 2000, my wife was saying, don't travel so much, stay around a little more. And sure enough, there was a law firm that was hiring. They'd hire anybody. And so they hired me as a technical writer, with a PhD, and I became what's called a patent agent. And a patent agent's not quite an attorney, but it's somebody with a technical background can do. They have to study and pass an exam, and that gives them the right to practice patent law. And it's a fun thing to do. You can become a patent examiner at the USPTO, and that's a good way to learn a lot. They're always hiring. So somebody with a technical degree, in chemistry or engineering or even biosciences can get an interesting job there. And so that was the beginning. Then I went to night school at UC Santa Clara University. And it was a pretty intense few years, working full time and going to law school. And but then I came out of it, both a scientist and a lawyer. But I'm still a product guy at heart, which makes being in Silicon Valley a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, you get to be around, all these tech companies that are basically changing the world. And then, I mean, I'm sure you get to hear all these crazy ideas that come to you.
And the thing I like about it is I get to do a different thing every day.
Yeah.
I mean, I have worked on advertising equipment for escalators, right? Putting ads on the banisters, and dog collars, and remote control vibrators, and everything you can, all kinds of apps. A good part of what I do is apps. So my phone is full of client apps, and that's pretty good. You get to do, on a typical day, I'll do 2 or 3 completely different technologies. Today, I'm going to do a bioscience thing that came out of UC Davis. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to probably do a AR, VR headset for Oculus. Something on that there.
That's really cool. So Oculus is owned by Facebook, which I was complaining about right before we got in here because I was trying to get campaigns going.
Yeah.
So I don't even know where to start because I have so many questions, but so the number one question that people ask me all the time when they have an idea for a product is, should I get a trademark or a patent for it every time I get an idea? And my answer, and please tell me if I'm completely wrong in this is just me, and I'm not an attorney, I'm not a lawyer, so this is just my personal opinion. So, and I tell people this, it's like, back when I was, when I had all these crazy ideas when I was younger and I was trying to start business, that's, our instinct is to protect ourselves, and everybody tells you to protect yourself. So, at first, like, I have an idea, I have to trademark it, I have to get a patent on it, and blah, blah, blah. But then you look into that, and the costs are just ridiculous to get it done, the right way, at least, right? You can try to do it yourself, but if you're a patent lawyer, good luck, have fun with that. But two, if it's not a proven business, if it's not a proven product, if it's not a proven anything, and you're not one of those huge tech companies, at that point, I don't even think it's worth it. Like, who's going to steal something from you that doesn't even exist yet? I tell people, just get in the market. If it gets traction and you see the traction, that it's gathering that traction, then go for it and then start investing on a patent, trademark, and all that stuff. Now, am I 100% wrong, or?
No, you're really pretty close. I mean, you have a good idea. It's the business model of, oh, I have a great idea, I'm going to patent it, and people come walking to my door, throwing money at me is just fantasy, right? And there are companies that try to sell that to you, and you'll see TV ads for things like that. But the ideas are out there. There's a lot of good ideas, but ideas only a couple of percent of a business, right? Or of actual money in your hand. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of work between the idea and everything else that you see. So it is a big step to go from, oh, I have an idea. And people who have ideas, who invent things, they tend to not just do one, right? They'll do one a week. Yeah. And the question is, what's the filter? Right. So patents can be really expensive wallpaper. I mean, that's what I call it, expensive wallpaper. When somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, I have a patent. I have this idea. I want to patent it, and I'm going to sell it to all these people." It's like, try selling. Here's the steps you can do. And in a minute, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about really what somebody can do to protect themselves when they're at that stage. And so there are a couple of organizations. I've worked with an organization that was out here that I met through clients, and I've done events for them, and they're called Eventbrite. They're no longer in California, and they're now in the Midwest, but they're actually an organization of inventors who really commercialize things. And if you go to their meetings, you'll meet people that will talk to you about their experience on QVC, or what it's like to sell to Walmart, or their nightmare of having a shipping container show up on their driveway with returned goods from Kmart, and their neighbors to complain. This is like the real life of actually getting out and selling something. So pretty much, for me, I'm only interested in people, unless they're really wealthy and have money to throw around. I'm interested in people who have a business that they want to start, and the patent's part of the business, because otherwise the chances of success are really small. I mean, that's part of why I became a patent attorney was, oh, I've got so many ideas. I might as well learn how to do this myself, right? And so now I have quite a few dozen patents, but turning them into money is not, is far rare and far between. It basically has to be the costs of a patent can be quite high. Getting a full patent, getting it filed is just the first step, and then there's back and forth with the patent office for a few years. So just off the top of my head, you might spend $20,000 or $25,000 getting a patent, and over 3 to 5 years. And unless you have a business behind that, it's really expensive wallpaper. $25,000 a square foot is a lot, right? So for somebody who's got an idea, who wants to start a business, there are things you can do to initially protect yourself without putting the big money out. And that's really the tactic. And that's a lot of what I talk about with my early stage clients. These are Silicon Valley startups, which is a different class than a startup business in a different environment other than Silicon Valley. And I'll talk a little bit in a minute about what the differences there. But the basic idea is to get a little bit of protection, and you can do that with something called a provisional patent application. There's some good books Nolo Press has some book called Patent Pending 24 Hours. That means 24 hours of work, not 21 day, right? But the easiest thing to do is get advice from a patent attorney. Spend a few hours of their time, 2 to 3 hours, working with them. Get an outline. Get them to give you an outline. Write some patent claims, which are part of the patent, and then you have to go and write a 30-page paper, right? And a lot of people, I remind them that they haven't written a 30-page paper in a long time. It's not like the thing unless you're a writer, you don't really do. So, then write what you have and get it filed. And, a reasonable budget, depending on how much help you get, is $1,000 to $2,000 on a project like that. And that lasts for 1 year. It starts.
That's it? Just 1 year?
It lasts for 1 year, and that is a non-extendable clock. So that means you have 1 year, you file it, and the day after you file it, you've got to be marketing and work in the streets and pitching your idea and seeing if it'll sell, see if it has legs. Because that 1 year, 11 months later, you have to decide, do I want to take this provisional application and turn it into a full patent application? Which means thousands of more dollars. In Silicon Valley, that could mean, another 15 to 20,000, depending on how big the application is or how much work there is to do. So you have a year to figure out if your idea is going to get legs, and then if it doesn't, you drop it. If it does, hopefully you have some money, you see some sales, you can actually have a business reason to spend that type of money on a patent attorney. And that's the strategy that, especially here in Silicon Valley, is people have ideas, they'll put a couple of thousand down on it. 11 months later, they'll say, well, that never went anywhere. Or, oh my God, it's the next best thing. We got to convert. People are throwing money at me. I'm really happy. So that's the step you can take to get into this really expensive business if you're small time. Now, the other thing to remember is that the patents, if you think they're expensive to get, enforcing them is 100 times more expensive.
Yeah.
To litigate a patent, you're looking at $2.5–3.5 million.
That's crazy.
Right, of legal fees. It's crazy. So for my companies, my early stage companies, the reason that they're doing patents is not to go out there and enforce them against other people, right? But what they want is they want to raise the value of their company so that every time they get investment from new investors or VCs and so on, they get a higher value. And then someday when they exit, which in Silicon Valley is short, 3, 5, 6 years, then they get a good sale price for their company, because whoever acquires them, whether it's Apple or Google or Facebook, then you get a good patent portfolio, which can really make a big difference on your exit. And that's when my goal is to pay for myself every time the company raises money, but really to make the big difference on exit. And I've seen cases where the patent portfolio, there's a couple of companies in a space about to be bought, and the one with the better patent portfolio, mine, gets bought, close to $400 million, a less than 3-year-old company. The other competitor closes their doors and is sold off to creditors, right? It dies, right? Because there's only going to be one buy. So it can make a huge difference in the outcome. And that's the goal of the patents in my area. And then for larger companies, they use it, Apple will fight Samsung and so on. They'll use it competitively in a different space. But that's, from my point of view, that's really the area of patents. I do have some clients that are, 30-year-old family companies in Oklahoma, right? Yeah. And they compete. They may be a family company, but they compete worldwide, and they're big enough. They've been around for 30 years, and they know they will do patents, and they will compete with them around the world, and use them strategically. But that's because they've been around. For a small company, it's usually not the best. It's not always the best choice. Often keeping things trade secrets better, but then of course they need to be really vigilant about that and have all their employees sign the right agreements and documents and control their secrets. But those are the differences. Patents are an expensive game to play. Yeah, and it is a lot different for a startup in Silicon Valley where you plan to exit in a few years versus a company that somebody wants to grow and own for 20 years.
Yeah, it's like, if you're somebody like me who has an idea like at least once a week, like I literally write it down on a whiteboard. If I was going to get patents for every single idea that I get, I'll be broke, because it's just, it's just I get ideas all the time. And I call it, in my industry, we call it shiny object syndrome. Like I have the power to run traffic to anything. You know what I mean? So it's like I get ideas. I'm like, I can run traffic to that and make money. Or I can do this and make money, but that's an interesting. I didn't think about it the way you brought it up. The real way to use it, which is that exit strategy, to have the patents in the portfolio to bring the value of the company up and say, hey, we own all these patents. Which, of course, now that I think about it, makes complete sense. But what's
one of the ways I look at it, with company or with people who have ideas, and I get them to file a provisional application. I tell them, look, if you go a year trying to sell this, and really working at it, and you find that people aren't willing to give you money, think about it, because you just spent a year of your life, right? And you're trying to get 50 grand investment for somebody. Now, which was worth more? The real valuable thing is the time that we all spend every day, right? And as you're saying, you might have tons of ideas, but you have a year to put every weekend in, and every evening in to pitching that idea and making it into a business. That's the real valuable thing. It's not that you have, that only you can spend.
So now when we're talking about big companies like Google, Facebook, Apple, and they always have all these patents for like stuff years ahead of where we're at right now, and you always see it in the tech news and stuff like that, like, oh, Apple filed a patent for this wireless whatever. I'm just saying that just to say it. But is that their way of locking up ideas, and are they just in an endless patent war in the courts? Because I'm sure the two of them are after the same things and they're similar in a way. How does that work? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah. So when the big guys fight against each other, there's often, settlements and agreements, and they'll, company A will trade. It's basically it's like playing poker. You have a bunch of cards in your hand, right? And the more patents you have, the more cards. And then you go to the other guy and say, okay, well, I've got this and you've got that. Let's play nice here. And they actually can do cross license agreements and stuff like that enables them to function as business, right? But occasionally they'll get stuck on something and go to loggerheads, and boom, all of a sudden you read about these big court cases, and they can make a huge difference. Usually it's even though they are sometimes big numbers, it's in each business, those are companies that make a huge amount of cash.
Yeah, Apple has plenty of money in the bank. They can afford it.
I've seen my small clients go up against a couple of big companies and win.
Wow.
If it's a slam dunk, I'm thinking right now of a pet product, right? And Petco lost. They pulled the product from.
Which brings me to my next question, because I was always told, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't even remember if I Googled it at one point, but I was always told, and I don't know, it's somehow I got in my head since I can remember, since I was in college or something. Somebody told me, or either looked it up or something, that if there's a patent and you change it by 10%, it's fair game. Is that true, or is that a lie, or is that just what I mean?
Let's talk about what's patentable. So in order to have something patentable, it has to be new, right? It has to be something somebody didn't do before, publish or make or use in public, or do something. And I'll tell you the history of that. What does it mean to use something in public? And there's in law, we have the idea of these cases that happened years ago, and we look to that to see what the judges decided, and that's what we call case law, and what the rules are now. And the rule there is back from in the 1800s, where somebody invented using whalebone in a corset, right, in a woman's corset, and the woman, his wife, wore it out on the street, right? And even though somebody, of course, she had her frock over it, but some, that was considered public use because it was modifying the shape of making her look slim and whatever they wanted back in those days. So public use could mean, using software on a website in the back end where people don't really see it, but that's still use in public. If you wanted to, there are some exceptions. Like if you're testing a road, right? You've got a new asphalt. You might find a experimental use exemption where even though it's in public, it's for experimental purposes, because the only way to really test road asphalt is on a real road, but you kind of put it down and see what happens. So that's the type of thing that, so it's got to be new, but it also has to be non-obvious, right? So when you say change something by 10%, it depends on the 10%. I mean, what would, and there's, it's not an objective standard. It's a subjective standard. So what would be obvious and what isn't obvious? So using, okay, now I'm stuck. I'm going to think.
Now you're going blank. I'm sure you can come up.
Yeah.
with
Okay.
something.
Here's an example. I got a coffee mug here. All right.
Right.
So, cheers. Coffee. So having those little cubes, those little cup things that you put in a dispenser, was that obvious?
Yeah.
30 years ago when it was invented. I mean, the coffee machines, Mr. Coffee drip machines have been around for decades. Right. But nobody put those little things that you could just drop in and push a button.
That's true. Okay?
So probably not so obvious because it went a long time without being done. Yeah. I mean, everything was there and there were obviously they became really popular. And so that's all evidence that it wasn't obvious because it was really successful. But that's an example. And we could look at things in software. I have a case right now where we have a company called HyperKey, and they have a virtual keyboard that you can download, and it gives you a bunch of function keys. So I could be text messaging with you on any messenger, and part of my keyboard would have a Yelp button and a Dropbox button, and I can hit the Yelp button and pick out a restaurant and instantly take the content and drop it into the conversation, or I can hit Dropbox and grab a link and just send you a file right there while I'm texting you, and it could be on any. It could be on WeChat, it could be on Facebook, anywhere, boom, boom, boom. Yeah, so that's an app. So the question is, how obvious is it to put function keys that execute other apps on the phone? It's kind of cool because you're actually, normally on the phone, you only execute one app at a time.
Yeah.
But I could be doing my email editor, texting to you, bring up this link from Dropbox and drop it in there without leaving the email editor. It's kind of cool. All right, so that's an example. Is that obvious, or is that not that obvious? And there's standards that have to be met. Of course, there's one more criteria that's important with what's patentable. You can't patent things that are natural in nature, right? You can't, like for instance, you can't just patent a gene that exists already in somebody's body. You might be able to patent using that gene as a test for a disease. Right, because
especially now you bring that up, we're talking about like biohacking. It's getting to a whole new level, so that's a fine line, right?
You can't. You can't patent a chemical that's in a plant, but you might patent the purification process or chemical itself. Right. So there's cancer drugs that come from tree bark, for instance. Right. It's been around forever, but extracting it all and then putting it in a concentrated solution, using it for cancer treatment is something that's definitely new. You can't cancel algorithm or patent an algorithm. So if it's just a pure algorithm, like doing a certain set of math steps to find how risky an option investment is, that's not patentable. Right. But of course, software is mostly algorithms. So when we patent software, and about 70 to 80% of the patents I do are software, we do the process and the result. In other words, not just the method of manipulating the image, but the hardware, all the nuts and bolts that go behind it. An example I was just working on yesterday was a company called CloudSight, which is an app, an iOS app you can download, and basically you can take a picture of something and it identifies what it is, like somebody's nice bag. You can say what the brand is and all this kind of stuff, and it actually runs on your phone, and I can take my phone and move it around to different objects in my office here, And in real time, the word of what the object is just pops up. Boom,
I think
boom.
I have an app like that on my phone because I was checking it out because that's the technology that Facebook uses to recognize everything on your ads, all your pictures and whatever.
Yeah,
you
they
post.
do that type of stuff. Yeah, they look at ads, and Facebook is the champion because so they had a technique where they used people to tag other people in pictures, right?
Yep.
And that was the data that they used to teach their face recognition algorithm.
Right.
So a lot of, when I look at AI patents, which are fun, right? A lot of it is getting the good data. How do you get 10 million, or in their case, probably 500 million pictures with people's names tagged? Well, you set up a system where you can tag your friends.
But it was boom. Like, if you think about it, like at the time, it was such a simple thing that I didn't even think. I mean, Zuckerberg's.
They're collecting data and they're going to use it to train an
it's
AI.
Just, I mean, it's like the like button. They even said it. It's like it was just supposed to be a like button, and then it became this huge thing that we can't it's causing all this chaos. It's like it's crazy. So
you've used their ad system, right?
I spent millions on their ad system. That's what I do for a living. Yes.
Right. So it is a marvel. If you've ever been in there, I want to target this, and then I want to do similar groups, and it's like, oh my gosh, yeah.
Well, I tell clients all the time, it's like, there's a reason Zug is in front of Congress like every 3 months. Like, I mean, now I don't have access to what I used to in the beginning. In the beginning, I could see everything.
About a year and a half ago, the
Cambridge Analytica thing happened, and then a lot of it got, got taken away from us, quote unquote. But I tell people all the time,
you could target by eye color. I want people with blue eyes.
You could get really detailed. You could get, I joke all the time, like, if I wanted to target somebody with, give you an example, like how much their house was worth or their credit score, what kind of car they drive, what brand, all that credit card, what credit card did they use, what time of the day. I mean, it was really hardcore. And then they took it away because Cambridge Analytica happened. But I tell people all the time, I'm like, it was never that. Advertisers, the people who got access to the details were people who hacked the API and extracted the information without their permission. People like me who used the platform to run ads, we never saw, Steven likes this, and that, and this is how much money Steve has and what car. It was never like that for us. It was just a pool of data that we had access to. I would say, hey, I need you to target people in Palo Alto who drove a Mercedes who make $350,000 a year or more. And they have third-party data where they will get that information as well.
Yeah, they'll get it.
But it was never like I could see it by the exact person. And listen,
you couldn't say Joe has this Mercedes and this is what Joe made. You never get that.
And listen, the information is still there. The only difference is that the ads, it was all manual back then. It was all by interest targeting and signals. Now it's the AI putting 2 and 2 together and obviously learning from all the information that all advertisers and companies out there. We have pixels, the Facebook pixel and Google, and everybody does it. It's a piece of code that you install in your store and sends all that information back to Facebook. And that's how the AI keeps learning and learning and learning. Yeah. And at one point, it's going to get to the point where, I won't have a job anymore of actually running the ads themselves because, the more data that they gather and it learns from it, it'll just know what to do. It's pretty interesting stuff. But the other question that I was going to ask you, 2 more questions actually, because we're going to run out of time. But one, how do we deal? Well, I say we, like I run a law firm, but how do companies deal with China? Because China is known for copying everything, and they have no shame in their game. Like, it happened to me. I've had Chinese manufacturers copy my stuff. And it's like, it's not even worth the legal fees to try to go after it because it's going to go nowhere. But with I don't have patents. So when it comes to patent, is it even feasible to go after them?
Is. Yeah, it's pretty good. There's less expensive things you can do that stop importing. You can threaten. So if somebody copies but again, you got to look at the value, right?
Right.
If somebody copies a product that's making money, then it's worthwhile sending letters to Walmart saying, Walmart, you're carrying this product from China. We have the patents here. We'd be happy to give you a similar price. blah blah blah. Walmart will
Ooh, I
look
like
for
that
you right
hustle.
away.
I
They
like
will,
that.
you
I would
know,
have never even
that
guessed that.
right in the neighborhood store. Believe me, they'll roll over right away. It's and you got to be nice and friendly, right? You got to
Right.
be not vicious. You got to be right, because if
Right.
you threaten something and it's wrong, boy, you're on the hook for a lot of money. They'll come
Yeah.
back and sue you, and it'll be you who pays $1 million, right?
Right.
So yeah, there is some defenses, but again, it's a question of value. And I've had a client, with a really cool, who went to trade shows, is selling a product. It's a garlic grinder, right? And he's like, there's a guy who's made one just like this, who's selling it now. What can I do? And I said, and how much of this are you selling every year? Oh, 30,000. Well, just to get in the door on a patent infringement, just to make the initial threats is going to be that much, right?
Yes,
So
it's like it's not even worth it.
that's why, it's not as good. Patents are good for small companies. They're good. The people who get the best out of them are pharmaceutical companies, because they spend $1 billion on a drug. They need a strong patent not to get ripped off. They need
Right.
that protection, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're not going to invest in drugs. It's just got to be that way. Small and middle-sized companies really need them to defend themselves against the big guy. Otherwise, the big guy would just walk out. Anytime a small company would be successful, they'd just be copied by Google and Facebook and Apple, and they just walk all over, right? So they get in. So in Silicon Valley, what happens is they get bought for a lot of money by Google, Facebook, and Apple, or Amazon, right? Which makes the founders very happy and the investors very happy. And that's the way it works, right? So in other parts of the country, so big companies like Amazon and Facebook and Apple, they file lots of patents, thousands of patents there every year.
Hold on.
But they don't like it so much, because for them they now worry about the little guy, and if the little guy who has patents fails as a business, they become a patent enforcement company instead of a
Right.
business.
But okay, so
Right.
that's a good point. But and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I really want to ask this because I don't want to forget. So, for example, you brought up the tech companies. Facebook wanted to buy Snapchat. Snapchat said no. So Facebook goes, you know what? We're just gonna fucking do our own, and it's like literally dead on copy. So is that again that fine line of is it obvious or not?
It didn't work, right? Right. And so it's a matter of how much let's just buy Instagram and WeChat, right? So it's a matter of the patents. Somebody's doing business decisions. They have a spreadsheet, and they say, if we do this, it's worth this many hundreds of million, and we do this, it's worth $1 billion, right? And the patents on a deal like that make a huge difference.
Sure.
Right. They're going to the stories idea. I'm sure there's patents all over that. Right.
Yeah.
And who's going to have it next, and who's paying who a license and who's not paying. And
so you're telling me that Facebook could have actually paid a license fee to Snapchat to do the whole story?
Well, who knows? Snapchat might have said, no, that's our bread and butter. We're not going. We want you to buy our whole company for 15 billion or something. Who knows what? I have no idea about.
Right. No, I was just thinking out loud because because Facebook is notorious for copying things, so it's like, I was just wondering, I mean, they have the best lawyers in the world, I'm sure, so they know what they're doing, but I was just wondering that.
There's a book you might find interesting called Zucked.
Zucked? Really?
Zucked.
I'll write it down. I'm going to follow that.
And I know the author, and he was an early advisor to Zuck.
Okay.
And he saw the downside, and he's a very well-known Silicon Valley person. But it's Zucked. Zucked. And it talks about, and it's now a few years old. It talks about really how Facebook is using your information to make a lot of money and leverage and in the end, weaken you,
right. Okay,
you trade something.
Oh yeah, no, I know. Software, trust me, I've been doing this since Facebook became pretty much public, so I know that. I mean, I know most of it. I know it's been like that for a long time. The other thing I wanted to ask you was that seems to be very popular too is patent trolls. Like some people actually make a living of suing others for patents or claiming that the patent is theirs. I mean, if it's so expensive, How does that work?
So if you're, let's say you're an individual inventor. I've
Mm-hmm.
had clients do this. I had a client in the power storage space a few years ago who had built a pretty nice portfolio, probably spent $250,000, $300,000 building a nice family of patents on batteries. And he ended up selling that portfolio to a company that's in the business of enforcing, because that individual inventor didn't have a few $1,000,000 to sue the battery makers,
Mm-hmm.
but this patent. So the fact that enforcing patents is so expensive is allowed for a business where there's a middleman that says, oh, I'm going to buy up all these patents, and not just one group, but I'm going to buy 5 sets of patents in this one space, and then take that whole portfolio and go after the big manufacturers and sue them. And so they saw an inefficiency in the market, right, where it's still going on a lot, but not as much. The courts have kind of pushed back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
If you're the inventor suing, you actually have a little bit better position now than if you're a patent enforcement company. But in some ways, these guys just found an efficiency in the market, right? Because the battery companies would ignore my client. They're like, who are you? I'm not going to listen to you. I'm not going to answer an email, right? But when once it goes into litigation, I'm sure they could have bought that portfolio for a much less than is being spent in the litigation. Right?
Yeah.
They could have done the whole thing, right? But yeah, that's a pretty common
That makes
way.
sense, because there was a scam going on for a while there, and it actually happened to me. But luckily I'm married to somebody in the biz, so they were going around e-commerce stores and websites, and even though you got the images used on the site, because sometimes people use on their websites like royalty-free, images, and you get it from like Adobe and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So what they were doing is you will get an email and it looked legit with like a law firm, extension on it. And it's like, oh, you're using a copyright image, you have to pay us royalties, or we're going to sue you. And unfortunately, a lot of people who are new to this, or they don't know any better, they fall for it. And it's like a legit law firm like that. This is how they do it. I mean, and one day I got hit up. 2 of my stores got hit up, and I was like, oh, really? I was like, let me see that email. And actually, one of my best friends, she's my actual attorney. And I was like, hey, do you want to play with this? He's like, oh, yeah, let me see that. And she just went back at him. And then they came back at her one more time. And then she's like, and then they just disappear, because it's a scam. Yeah. It's a complete scam.
It can be, yeah. And there are situations where I've seen it be correct. Like, oops, we're supposed to get that from Google. I mean, if you can search royalty-free images in Google, and supposedly everything there is royalty-free.
Right.
But there's nothing really stopping somebody posting something there, calling it royalty-free, when they've taken it from somewhere else. So you can't be 100% sure. You need to be ready. You either get it from Getty Images or a quality source.
Oh, these were from Adobe, so that's what I was like, come on.
Yeah, so Adobe, if Adobe's selling you the image, then you just hand the letter to Adobe, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, when you use images in your ad content or stuff, you need to make sure that you used it properly. So.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying that there's people out there who are trying. If you know the source is right, do your research and don't fall for it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. No, we get hit. Attorneys get hit a lot by. I'm going to send you a cashier's check. Please keep half of it and send me the rest.
Oh yeah, I get
a settlement with this company in the Philippines. Send it, wire it to Russia, and then
All right, Steve. Listen, man, we're out of time. It's been almost an hour, but listen, thank you so much for coming on and answering all my questions.
Yeah, next time we'll do trademarks.
Yes, we'll do trademarks. That's another good one. Yeah. But Steven, if people want to find you, if they have a business that they want to look into, maybe getting a patent or defend themselves, where can they find you?
Yeah, Ramon Law. I assume you'll have a link.
Yep, I'll put the links in the description. No worries.
Link, and I'm on LinkedIn. Steven Colby, and I'm pretty easy to find. I have a big following on LinkedIn. That's a good way to contact me, and it's good. Ramon has about 33 locations around the world.
Oh wow!
We are a semi-virtual law firm, and we've been a since its founding so it's nice. It's good time to be in a firm that's all set up for working remotely anyway. But this is our norm. So
it's really cool.
yeah,
Like
lucky,
somebody can
yeah.
just contact and do it all over, from anywhere in the world. So, and you guys deal with anything in the world or just the US?
No, everywhere, all over. Europe, Eastern Europe, South America, Asia,
Okay, cool. So I have
all
a lot of
around.
people from Europe that listen to this and watch this. So that's all I was
Yeah, great. We're there.
asking. That's cool. All right, guys and girls, if you are looking to get a patent or you're working for a business, tech, startup, or whatever that's being VC backed, and you need to protect yourselves, make sure you reach out to Steve on LinkedIn or the link description in the description below. And Steven, thank you so much for coming on again. I really, really,
Great.
truly appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.